All right. Well, thanks for coming back to the Bigfoot Society podcast. We have Mark Matzke with us. Of course, you may have heard of Mark from the Small Town Monsters. If you're on the YouTube channel, then you can see the hat I'm wearing. So, Mark, hats off to you. The Small Town Monsters thing is really cool. Of course, this is from the Kickstarter. I want to say like 2 years ago. It was the which one was it? It was the one with On the Trail of Bigfoot.
Okay, right.
I had to get into that, and I was actually involved with the um, mm, the filming of the one with I'm blanking on the name. You got to help me out, but it's the one with Terror in the Skies, right? Yep.
Terror in the Skies.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was asking questions to certain individuals that were filmed in Iowa.
Okay.
The same
yeah.
day of the Van Meter Visitor Festival. So
Okay.
that was pretty
So
cool.
that would be Chad Lewis
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
Kevin Nelson.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
My buddy Andrew Peterson was filming that with his friends. So good stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
compliments because I don't even have a Small Town Monsters hat. That's something we get on Seth about. A lot of the crew doesn't have it because
Oh, really?
there was an original wave of hats, a very limited
Yep.
run. Those sold out very quickly at conferences and things.
Yeah,
And
there's not a lot of those from what he says.
There are not.
Yeah.
So we even bang on Seth occasionally to say, do you have our hats yet? And a lot of us don't. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, before this becomes the Hat Podcast, which I'm sure people listening would love.
Yes.
So, Mark, would you mind? How do you introduce yourself?
Well, I guess I would say that as far as Small Town Monsters goes, I am support behind the scenes. I've been a co-writer on a lot of the most recent films ever since Boggy Creek Monster. I started to do some of the transcribing of the interviews, which is simply taking the recorded interview and breaking it down almost word for word, so that when Seth is going through, or whoever's editing a given project, can see where the topics shift in the conversation or in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easier to edit. And then from there, I got into the co-writing on Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, and also narrated that one. So I've done a little bit of everything. A lot of the B-roll, I shouldn't say a lot, but a good deal of the B-roll on the Trail of Bigfoot was taken on my iPhone. So it's fun to watch that now and go back and say, hey, that's footage I got just shooting my iPhone, trailing behind Seth and whoever we were talking to at a given moment, and Shane Corson and those guys.
I just had Shane on this.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but Shane is fun. I just had Shane on the podcast. He's a fun talk. Yeah.
He is fun.
He's good.
He really knows his stuff. And he's one of those guys that you would just say is absolutely legit in terms of being out there in the field. Somebody like me, I would characterize as just 100% a researcher in this like historic sense, in the book sense. And I mean, we go out for the films and interview people and go on site to some of these famous areas. But what Shane does, what Derek Randalls and those guys do, is the other end of the spectrum, and it's absolutely necessary, which is the day in, day out, or just as often as possible field work that they do. Gotcha. And Shane's awesome. I think Seth would tell you he saved our life most likely out on the Olympic Peninsula.
Are you kidding?
Well,
oh wow.
He heard something in the woods, and he was real cool about it, but he went to check it out, and he was kind of 90% sure that there was a mountain lion in the general vicinity. He heard it, and we heard something. And so, he went into the woods after whatever was making the sound, I guess to either
Oh my
flush it out
goodness.
or scare it away.
Yeah.
He
Ooh.
said, "Yeah, that's probably a mountain lion, you guys." And we're like, "Okay."
Oh, that's nothing to mess around with.
Yeah,
They'll
it's
jump on you and snap your neck. Like
right,
it's
it's pretty
crazy. Yeah.
serious, and
Yeah.
we made light of it because that's
Yeah.
how we handle most things, but later on, I think it kinda hit us that this is the real deal, this is, Pacific Northwest to the uttermost,
Oh
but
yeah, totally.
yeah.
Totally.
But I guess all that is to say my role with Small Town Monsters is I think of it mostly in terms of writing and
Okay.
helping to, give from a narrative standpoint some editing. I love the, narration part of it. I love to I'm really happy with how Invasion and on Chestnut Ridge turned out from a
Mhm.
narration standpoint and being able to do Champ, and one of, the Case Files episodes, I do UFOs
Okay.
of the Ridge. So that it's just but like a jack of all trades behind the scenes type guy, and at the same time, then being co-host on Sasquatch originally, and now Monsteropolis with Seth
Yeah.
is another way that it's taken a couple different forms over the years, but uh, I can honestly say that it's probably because of Sasquatch the most and first that opened the doors for me to just network and meet a lot of the people who I had
I'm
read books
sure.
by,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
I was talking to them in an interview format like this, or
Yeah.
meeting them at conferences, and they had listened to shows that Seth and I had did, which was pretty crazy. And so I guess my to sum it all up, my role is as a researcher and sort of a behind the scenes, just a helper.
That's
And
awesome.
it's
That's
opened
very
so
cool.
many doors for me, I can't even
Oh,
believe it.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yep. Um, so there's that. What's the 9 to 5 for
For
Mark
me,
Matzke? What's
yeah,
that?
the 9 to
What's that about?
5 is, my vocation is as a called minister in the
Mhm.
Lutheran Church.
Cool.
People who are into the denominational breakdown, we are Lutheran Church Missouri Synod,
Mhm.
which was founded largely by German immigrants to the United States, coming into the Missouri area, St. Louis and the surrounding, Mississippi River Valley area, and then fanning out across the United States. But and I'm a pastor of a church that
Okay.
has in the neighborhood of 450 members or so.
Oh, that's very solid. That's
Yeah,
solid, dude.
it's
Yeah.
a pretty
Yeah.
pretty active church,
Good.
and one that is situated about 20 miles due east of downtown Cleveland. So we're
Okay.
Northeast Ohio, and it's just a great situation for me. And the thing that is interesting is, you kind of tentatively start letting people in on what your interests are after being there for a little while, at least, so that you've established a relationship of trust. So then you can also
Right.
say, hey, guess
Yep.
what my hobby essentially is, and um,
That's awesome.
it's really been very well accepted. I mean, I can't imagine somebody, a pastor in the church doing what I do 50 years ago. I just
Yeah,
don't see it
totally.
happening.
No
Um,
way. No
yeah,
way. Yep.
attitudes have changed tremendously to the point
Mhm.
where a lot of our, shouldn't say a lot, but a handful of members either know what I do and like it and listen to the shows and
That's
others are
awesome.
to the degree that they've backed Kickstarters consistently, like
Very cool.
for many years and consecutively. So the support really is there, and they enjoy hearing the stories, I think. And some of them have even told me about some of the more unusual things that have happened to them. And
Very
again, I
cool.
don't think maybe even 10 or 15 years ago they probably would have felt as comfortable talking about cryptids or
Mhm.
hauntings or anything like
Oh
that.
yeah.
And there's just a general um, comfort level with that these days that I find pretty refreshing for obvious reasons. Um,
Yep.
so that's been cool.
Do you ever have a visitor to your church that comes up to you after the end of the service and is like, great message, Pastor, but let's talk Bigfoot now that I got you. Like, that's got to happen. Or has that never happened?
That has never happened at
Okay.
church, although I have an interesting story that's close to that. But
Okay.
what has happened is where it's come close is at various screenings that have taken place. You know, we
Mm.
always try to get a movie shown
Yep.
sometime closely after the general release at the Canton Palace Theater,
Yeah,
a
exactly.
beautiful old theater in downtown Canton. And I've had people come up to me at Palace screenings afterwards and say, you know, we drove up from Columbus and we go to the church of a pastor that you know. So I've had those type of connections where it's been close.
That's cool. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, and
Very
they,
cool.
it's sort of the same sensation. And what they're telling me is it's so cool that, you know, they express it to me as, you know, we were watching STM on Amazon Prime, and it said that you were a Lutheran pastor, and we couldn't believe
Mhm.
it. So we
Mm.
connected some of the dots, and, you know, we go to a church of someone, another pastor who knows you very well. And so
Nice.
there are those type of connections that are out there.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to, you've already mentioned that because of Saswa and small town monsters, etc., you've had some really cool experience. What is, if you had to say the number one, like, I can't believe that just happened to me or that I'm here, what would that be? And that's probably going to be tough because I can think of like three for you.
Yeah. I think the A number one would have to be last year. I was invited, and my son Andy was invited to present at the International Cryptozoology Conference held in Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine. Yep.
Yeah, when
Yep.
Lauren asked us
Oh.
not only to come out but to present,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the whole "you could have knocked me over with a feather"
That's
type
so
of
cool.
situation.
Yeah.
And I think related to that would have you know, a very close second is also Lauren Coleman related, because, you know,
Yeah.
he was one of my major ways into the field of cryptozoology in the first place, reading Mysterious America, you know, the first
Sure.
edition in the mid 80s as a kid. And when we invited him out to the second Minerva Monster Day, Seth asked if Andy and I would pick him up from the airport and just make sure he got to his hotel in Minerva, Ohio later that day. So we got to pick him up, drive him around, you know, go antique shopping. And so
Oh,
the
you
whole day
kidding
we're like,
me? No
yeah.
way.
And he
Oh,
was
that's the
just,
best right there.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was just, yeah, thinking about it
Yep.
right now. I mean, you can tell there's like an unreal quality to it,
Yeah.
but that was enhanced 100-fold by the fact that he was just down to earth,
Yep. I
super
bet.
interested in Andy and what his academic interests were and what his, you know, extracurricular interests were.
Mm-hmm.
We basically spent those 2 whole days with him, and just got to know him at a very personal level. And there's a point at which, um, you know, he brought items to sell in our vendors area, and so it had a little International Cryptozoology Museum table set up among the
Nice.
vendors, and he had to go in. I think he wanted to watch the screening of Minerva Monster, so he asked my son, "Will you run my table for me?"
Oh,
And
that's
he said,
awesome. Yeah.
"Yeah," and he said, "Okay, well, Andy, now you are on staff at the International Cryptozoology Museum." And we were
Very
just like
cool. Very
looking
cool.
at each other like, this is the best. So I
Unreal.
think, you know, they're all related in some way, to Lauren. And I guess I would say in this time of lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
I would, you know, if you have the means to do this, support your favorite small business,
Oh,
cryptozoology and
100%.
supernatural
100%.
people.
Yeah.
ICM, guys like Cliff Barrickman and
Yep.
the
North American Bigfoot Center, right?
absolutely. I
You
think
got
it's
to do
really
it
important right now
for the
to
next generation so it's around. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the being asked to go out there and actually present in front of the crowd that had gathered was really unforgettable. And I put together a little presentation on the Peninsula Python, which is
Oh,
Northeast
that sounds fun.
Ohio. Yeah, it's a
Nice.
specific couple of cases of the allegedly a sighting of a full-grown python in the Cuyahoga River Valley and around a
Wow.
small location near Peninsula, Ohio, which is within the
Hmm.
Cuyahoga Valley National Park
Check that
today.
out.
And it's just an incredible story, not because I'm convinced that people actually saw a big python, but because of how it became woven into the local culture. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, mostly
Yep.
because of one singular person, a writer for a Cleveland paper named Robert Bordner, who is also um, a Peninsula resident, and
Mhm.
he ended up being the first president of the Peninsula local public library. And if you go to the Peninsula Library today, there's one major mosaic on an interior wall that's Peninsula Python themed.
Oh, really?
And it's
That is
because
so
he
cool.
commissioned a local artist to do it, and it survives. I mean, and
Wow.
occasionally Peninsula will still have Peninsula Python days,
Mhm.
not every year, and it's kind of weather dependent or
Yep.
whether there's the Chamber of Commerce sort of feels like doing it, but it survives to the present day.
Yeah.
Although I fear that it's in danger of, outside of Peninsula proper, if you were to ask somebody in the Cleveland area, have you heard of the Peninsula Python? And chances are they'd say no, just because it's so specific and so
Yep.
small scale. But I love the entire story. And Peninsula Library houses essentially every article ever written by Bordner and others about the Python. And it's fun to go in there because the director is more than happy to talk to anybody about it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, you know about this? Yeah, yeah, I do. Can you show me anything? And he just opened the files. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it sounds just like how the Van Meter Visitor is in Van Meter, Iowa, just outside of where I live in West Des Moines. And that is just the most fun day festival I've gone for the last 4 or 5 years. And every year it gets a little bit bigger. You wait, it's going to be huge. Like this
Hmm.
last year, we had like Jay Pachochin, from Wisconsin. So I'm serious. Like every year,
Yeah.
Small Town Monsters is coming up next. Like
Yes.
we're gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, like who knows what the future will bring, but it's very cool. Like those little towns in their heritage like that. I love that stuff. I grew
Hmm.
up in Western Mass, and man, the stuff out there is crazy too.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so coming up in the future, um, well, I mean, who knows right now, but I know that you had some interesting things planned for future Small Town Monsters, um, including things like, like the Bell Witch, which is very like, that's kind of a departure from like the cryptid stuff. Um, is that something where you've had to like, kind of mentally prepared for that coming down the pike, or like how, I don't know, I would have to think maybe twice about how close I get involved with that. But that's me,
Sure.
you know. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
like I don't know.
I
It's
understand.
crazy if you read that story,
It
right? Like,
is.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No doubt. It is. It isn't. It is a departure for sure. And it's, in a sense, it's the type of expansion that we're starting to do. In the sense that Seth is open always to ideas from his team about what do you want to do next.
Oh,
what
okay.
projects you want to consider, because the whole Bell Witch project really was brought to Seth by Jason Udis, who is a production manager for us and does a lot of the stuff that you don't typically think of in terms of filmmaking, but everybody who participates in an interview on screen, for example, you need them to sign a waiver that they're not going to come back and you know file a lawsuit or something because they don't like how it turned out, and just scheduling
Right.
appointments, things like that. And he does all that. And Jason has also branched out into co-writing, and he was a
Okay.
co-writer on Momo, for example.
I love Momo so much.
Oh,
My
good.
goodness,
Thank
that's
you.
the most fun movie to watch. You
Great.
guys did really good on that.
Oh, I
I love
appreciate
it.
that so much.
Being in
Because
central Iowa, I was like, I could just drive down. I could just drive down.
hmm
But I know there's going to be people that try that crud. But I was like, it's so close. Oh man, I loved it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really amazing thing for me, because my involvement was on that was I didn't participate in any of the filming because,
Hmm.
well, I shouldn't say that. In the documentary portion, I didn't participate in the filming. For the faux film, I
Right.
was involved in that part of it. But for me, the most fun was writing, because it was Jason and I and Seth um, working on the film within the film, and that was just a blast to do. And what was so striking to me was how the film in my head, how close it actually came to being what you see on screen. Because
That's cool.
you go into it from a writer standpoint thinking, I'm going to put this down on paper, and chances are it'll never look anything like what I'm thinking. And just the opposite happened. It was pretty wild in that regard.
Nice.
But anyway, back to the Bell Witch. I mean, I think the way that we're looking at this story, as freaky as it is, and as I really resonate with what you say about thinking twice
Hmm.
about getting involved closely with it. In small town monsters fashion, we're most interested probably in the folkloric elements
Okay.
of it.
Cool. Yep. Yep.
Not to
Awesome.
say that it's going to be a dry academic exercise, 'cause I don't think it will be, but we're going to be trying to probably make some connections between
Okay.
Bell Witch, and I'm just learning now about this whole wizard clip story that comes out of West Virginia. I'd never heard of this before, and I'm
Oh
just starting to
no.
hear about it now. But it's got some of the same poltergeist-ish elements to it,
Oh
and
boy.
families being afflicted, religious figures, clerical figures becoming involved. So you hear some of these early stories, and you set them next to one another, and
Mhm.
it raises some questions. And I think that's sort of
Sure.
that's one of the angles we'll probably take in terms of
That's
telling that
cool.
story.
That's
Yeah.
cool. I can't wait. Are you up for some rapid fire questions
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
Instagram? All right, cool. Okay. First one is from Cryptid Chat Girl, which is Yami's really cool. So listeners, check her out. I had an episode with her a few back. But she asks, what is the most interesting thing you've investigated or would like to investigate?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a
That's
grenade.
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I've sort of talked about it before. Probably on one hand, I'll I'll make it two-part rapid fire. On
Okay.
one hand is the Peninsula Python story, just because it's so
Um,
unique
yep.
to our area, and there's a cultural imprint here that still you can trace it, which I find absolutely fascinating. And there's so many rabbit trails with it, including the history of the artist who did the mosaic of the Peninsula
That's
Python,
awesome.
and also the mosaic that's on the front of the library itself, which is of the Cuyahoga River winding through the valley, and her history as an artist. So probably that, and also because of literally walking into the historical society and having them get the stuff out of the file cabinet and lay it out in front of me.
That's cool.
It's just
That is
an
cool.
unforgettable experience, one that I
Yeah.
kind of hope to uh, do over again in the future, maybe for future research or something. But um, I think to go a different direction with that question was the time that we were able to spend in Wisconsin, in at Bray Road, and
Cool.
in Jefferson County. In particular, being on site at the St. Coletta's Institute, where the old 1930s report from the night watchman Shackleton, I think was his name. This is like 1932. He saw what appears today we'd call a dog man digging in an Indian burial mound, and
Okay.
had a
Yep. Yep. I've heard
confrontation
of
with
this.
it.
I'm like, this sounds
Yeah,
super familiar. Yep.
yeah. It's a backbone of Linda Godfrey's research. I think
Hmm.
she's
Oh,
pretty
she's
much
such a nice,
responsible for,
nice
yeah,
person. Yeah.
for bringing that story to light.
Yep.
So I think that too, in the mid to late 90s, I became aware of the Bray Road incident, and through Inside Edition and all of those things, and then getting my hands on,
It's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Well,
getting,
hey, that's what you had back then,
that's
right?
what it
Inside
was.
Edition.
It's
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
and that was kind of an eye-opening reminder, going back through footage for Beast of Bray Road, because we did look into that a lot, look into those sources. Um, but I think that was one of the most interesting things too, because Linda got us access to some places um,
Nice.
where where it's private property. I mean, not, you just can't go there and
Right.
hang out and hope to
Hmm.
see the Beast of Bray Road. It's really hard, actually. If any, I would say to anybody who's up there in extreme southern Wisconsin, if you have the chance to drive up and down Bray Road, by all means do it. But just know there's nowhere to stop, because
That's
it's
what I
all,
hear. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
fields and
Yep.
privately owned property. And if you know farmers, then they don't necessarily like people just
No.
roving around on
They
their,
have shotguns.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So she was able to get us into places there that warranted some further investigation and questions, and we got to talk to people that she knows and has vetted, in a sense. So that was super interesting, because I think that whole Bray Road and the dog man of Wisconsin, there's so much going on there, just from a phenomena standpoint, that it's endlessly fascinating to me.
That's awesome. And the second question, you pretty much already covered. I think it's Andy's your son, right? Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Andy asks,
Yes.
is Dogman real and where can I find him? You pretty much already covered it, but
Yeah.
if you have any follow up, he
Not.
seems to be trolling you on this one.
Yeah,
But
a little bit. A little bit. I'd say look under your bed. Maybe there's one under
oh,
there.
gotcha. Dad comes through. That's awesome.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, very cool. We're actually already getting close to the end. Um, if no one, and I would find this surprising, but if people have never heard of you, um, what is the best way that they can keep up to date with what you're doing? Uh, Social media, plug stuff, what have you?
Sure. Well, ultimately, I'd say smalltownmonsters.com would be the place to start,
Okay.
because we have that's sort of the central location where you can learn about all of the films, and the podcasts are linked up there as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the back catalog to Sasquatch is linked up there, as well as
Nice.
Monsteropolis, which is an
Yep.
active podcast. And Sasquatch was essentially 100% Bigfoot themed, although we did veer occasionally into other topics. But Monsteropolis is very much in the coast to coast AM or in
If
search
you,
of type of, grab bag type of thing, just because we wanted to be able to talk about whatever we felt like on a given week. So that's sort of the theme of Monsteropolis is
yeah,
essentially
it's great.
whatever. What
The episode where you go over the history of Bigfoot exploitation movies in the 70s and 80s
oh
is
yeah.
fantastic. That should be a book. Like, it is really, really good. Like, if you never heard that episode, go listen to it after this. It's really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
That's like that's in our wheelhouse for
it's so
sure.
good.
So I'm glad that you like that because and also I mean, seriously, if you're interested in Bigfoot cinema in general, you have to pick up David Coleman's book. I
Okay.
believe it's the Bigfoot filmography. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep, I know which one you're talking about.
it's
Yeah.
it's so thorough as
Okay.
I couldn't, it's not the type of book that you necessarily pick up and read cover to cover because it's too expansive. There's just too much
Hmm.
information, but it's perfect for the type of research that someone would do for an episode like that.
Very cool. Yeah. Oh
Someone wants
yeah.
to learn
That's a
more
great
about
reference. Yeah.
Creature from Black Lake, for example. You just
Hmm.
got like 3 or 4 pages on it, which I don't think there anywhere else you could go would have that much
Yeah. Right.
information in one
Exactly.
place. So, yeah, so that's it. We're also, of course, Monsteropolis and Small Town Monsters both are active on Facebook,
Hmm.
Instagram, Twitter, all the usual suspects.
Very
Um,
cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again for coming on. We'll have to have you on in the future. Maybe once if you get to the point where you're going and doing the Bell Witch stuff, I would love to have kind of retrospective episode where you talk about anything that happens when you're doing that. That'd be
uh,
cool. But
yes.
again, thank you for coming on. Um, yeah,
Yeah, thanks for
and
having me. It's
we'll
it's
be
a
talking to
blast.
you later.
Okay, cool. Thank you.